Sometimes a football match doesn't need a dramatic scoreline to leave you with plenty to talk about, and that's exactly what happened when Spain hosted Egypt in a pre-World Cup friendly at the RCDE Stadium in Cornellà El Prat. The final score read 0-0, but underneath that flat scoreboard was a night full of storylines, debuts, a near miss off the woodwork at both ends, a red card laid on, and a Spanish side that spent 90 minutes trying to find a breakthrough that simply never arrived. Let's start with the bigger picture, because context matters here. This wasn't a competitive fixture with anything riding on it in terms of points or qualification. It was a tune-up match, the kind of friendly national teams scheduled specifically to test depth, experiment with personnel, and fine-tune details before the real tournament football begins. Spain head into this World Cup as one of the favorites on paper, carrying the kind of squad depth that lets a manager completely reshuffle his lineup from one match to the next without losing much quality, and that's precisely what Luis de la Fuente decided to do here. Coming off a Nations League qualifying assignment away in Belgrade against Serbia, de la Fuente handed out a near-total overhaul of his starting 11 for the Egypt friendly, with Lamine Yamal standing out as essentially the only name retained from that previous lineup. Everyone else got a chance to either start fresh or prove themselves in a different role, which tells you everything about how this match was really meant to be used. Egypt, by contrast, came into Cornellà with a far more settled approach. Rather than rotating heavily, the Egyptian coaching staff kept almost the exact same starting 11 that had taken the field just 3 days earlier, suggesting their priorities for this particular window leaned more toward continuity and cohesion than experimentation. It made for an interesting contrast in approach before a ball was even kicked, one team using this game to figure things out, the other treating it as another building block in an already established plan. That contrast is worth dwelling on for a moment, because it says something about where each federation is in its tournament preparation. Spain arrives at this World Cup with the kind of squad depth that allows a manager to essentially field 2 competitive starting 11s without much drop-off in quality, and friendlies like this one exist almost entirely to stress test that depth under real match conditions rather than just training ground drills. Egypt, working with a tighter pool of senior internationals and one clear standout in Marmish, has less room to experiment and more incentive to build chemistry among the players most likely to actually start once the tournament begins. Neither approach is wrong, they simply reflect 2 different sets of resources and 2 different sets of priorities heading into the same competition. Once play got underway, Spain looked to assert themselves early, just as you'd expect from the side with home advantage and the bulk of the attacking talent on the pitch. David Raya started in goal, with Pedro Porro, Robin Lenormand's defensive partner Mosquera, Dean Huijsen, and Alex Grimaldo forming the back line in front of him. In midfield, Carlos Soler and Pablo Fornals were given the responsibility of dictating tempo, while further forward, Lamine Yamal, Dani Olmo, and Mikel Barrenetxea supported Ferran Torres up top. Spain pushed forward in the opening minutes and won an early corner, with Porro forcing a save and Egyptian goalkeeper El Shenawi holding firm. It was a promising start, the kind of opening 5 minutes that usually suggests goals are coming. They didn't come easily, though. Spain kept the ball for long spells, worked it through midfield, and created half chances through clever combination play between Lamine Yamal, Dani Olmo, and Ferran Torres, but nothing quite clicked into a clear-cut opportunity. Egypt, for their part, sat compact and disciplined, content to soak up pressure and look for moments to break forward through their most dangerous attacker on the pitch, Omar Marmish. And it nearly paid off for them in spectacular fashion. Midway through the first half, Marmish drifted into space that nobody picked up, cut inside, and unleashed a shot that beat David Raya all ends up, only to crash off the right-hand post and bounce clear. It was the kind of moment that completely changes a match if it goes in, and for a few seconds, the home crowd inside Cornellà went silent waiting to see which way that ball would bounce. Spain came closest to breaking the deadlock themselves just before the break, when Grimaldo whipped a dangerous cross toward Ferran Torres lurking at the back post, only for an Egyptian defender to intervene at the last possible moment and clear the danger. It summed up a first half that, by most honest assessments, lacked real fluidity from the Spanish side despite their control of possession. The passing was tidy enough, but the final ball and the decisive movement in the box just weren't quite synced up, and Spain went into the dressing room at halftime with a scoreline that, while not a disaster given the friendly nature of the game, clearly wasn't sitting well with their head coach. That much became obvious immediately after the restart. Luis de la Fuente didn't wait around to make changes. He made 4 substitutions at once heading into the second half, bringing on Pedri, Rodri, Fermin Lopez, and Victor Munoz in place of Carlos Soler, Pablo Fornals, Dani Olmo, and Lamine Yamal. It was less a tweak than a genuine reset of the engine room and the front line, and the impact was noticeable almost immediately. Spain looked sharper, more direct, and considerably more dangerous in the final third once the fresh legs came on, dominating large stretches of the second half and racking up considerably more shots and chances than they had managed in the entire opening period. Fermin Lopez in particular gave Spain's attack a different dimension, forcing a save from the Egyptian goalkeeper with a low effort from the edge of the box and continuing to probe for openings as the half wore on. Spain kept pushing, kept circulating the ball through midfield, and kept testing an Egyptian defense that, while organized, was clearly feeling the weight of sustained pressure. The best chance of the entire second half arrived from a dead ball situation, when Grimaldo stepped up to a free kick in a promising position and curled a strike toward goal that beat the goalkeeper completely, only to cannon off the crossbar and bounce away to safety. It was a cruel moment for Spain, the kind of strike that, on another night, finds the net and changes the entire complexion of the match. As the clock wound down, Spain continued making changes designed to freshen up the attack, bringing on Borja Iglesias and Jeremy Pino in search of a late winner, while also handing Joan Garcia his senior debut in goal in place of David Raya. Substitute appearances like these matter more than casual viewers sometimes realize, since friendlies like this one are often the only realistic stage for uncapped or rarely used players to get senior international minutes before a major tournament. Both Barrenetxea and Joan Garcia earned their first appearances for the senior national team in this match, a personal milestone that will matter to them long after this particular scoreline is forgotten. Egypt's night ended with 1 player fewer on the pitch, as defender Mohamed Fathy picked up a second yellow card deep in the closing stages and was sent for an early shower, leaving his side to play out the final few minutes a man down. By that point, though, Spain simply couldn't find the breakthrough their second-half performance probably deserved, and the match petered out into the goalless draw that had looked increasingly likely since the opening whistle. It's also worth being upfront about one uncomfortable detail from the night that had nothing to do with what happened on the pitch. Reports from inside the stadium noted that a section of the crowd directed offensive chanting toward Egyptian supporters during the match, conduct that was rightly criticized in the aftermath and stood in sharp contrast to the otherwise festive, flag-waving atmosphere around Cornella. It's the kind of behavior that has no place in football, friendly or competitive, and it's worth acknowledging honestly rather than pretending the night was without blemish. So what does a 0-0 friendly actually tell us heading toward the World Cup? For Spain, probably more than the scoreline suggests. De la Fuente got to see almost his entire pool of available attacking and midfield options in live action across 90 minutes, learned that his bench options can change the rhythm of a game significantly, and handed valuable senior debuts to 2 players who could realistically be part of his tournament plans depending on form and fitness closer to kickoff. The finishing simply wasn't there on this particular night, but the patterns of play, the control in midfield, and the sheer depth on display all point toward a squad that has more attacking solutions than it knows what to do with, which, frankly, is a good problem for any coach heading into a World Cup to have. For Egypt, this was a respectable result against one of the tournament favorites, built on defensive discipline and one moment of real quality from Marmoush that very nearly won them the game outright. Coming away from Spain with a clean sheet, even in a friendly, is the kind of confidence boost a team can carry into bigger fixtures, and it reinforced just how much this current Egyptian side leans on Marmoush as their primary source of individual magic in the final third. In the end, nobody walked away from Cornella with bragging rights, but both sides walked away with something more useful than 3 points, real information about where their squads stand just before the tournament that actually matters begins. If you're following the road to this World Cup, stay subscribed, because there's a lot more build-up coverage coming before the group stage kicks off for real.